Welcome to Microcollege, a podcast exploring innovative, place-based, and humanly scaled responses to the crises in higher education, meaning, and discourse in our time. Everyone knows that colleges and universities are at a breaking point, but what can be done? I'm Jacob Hunt, the director of Thoreau College, a microcollege in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Join us each week as we tackle this question head-on. Welcome to Microcollege. This week on the podcast, we are really excited to speak with a couple of folks speaking to us all the way from Sweden, from what I would consider one of the oldest, most experienced members of this microcollege movement, or what we call the microcollege movement around the world. We're speaking about the International Youth Initiative Program in Ytterjärna, Sweden. We're speaking with today Reinoud Meijer, one of the co-founders, as well as Noam Hitsch, one of the current participants in YIP15. This is a program that's been going on for 15 years. Welcome, Reinoud and Meijer and Noam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be on.
Yeah. So today, Reinoud is originally from the Netherlands and has been involved with youth and education for many years. He's organized, facilitated, initiated, and founded a number of youth conferences, projects, and initiatives before co-founding the YIP program. He has a passion for human potential and development, for regenerative agriculture, food, culture, and lifestyles, and for the power of imagination put into action. Noam was born in Germany and grew up in Austria and went to Waldorf school up to 10th grade. After that point, she decided to take her learning into her own hands and went to several different biodynamic farms and Camp Hills in the United States and in Europe to learn about agriculture and different forms of community. Agriculture, in combination with the social realm and personal development, has been instrumental teachers for her so far. So we're here today to talk about YIP and what you've learned over the past 15 years, and also about the Social Initiatives Forum, which is an event coming up sometime later in the month of February when we're speaking to you. But before we get to that, here on the podcast, we always like to begin with people's biographies. So I'm wondering if each of you could share with us a bit about your educational background, and specifically, maybe starting with you, Reinoud, if you could reflect where you were personally around 18 to 21 years old, as a young adult setting out. Where were you? Who were you with? What were you doing? And what stands out as a big influence on you during that period?
Hi, thank you. Yes. Well, it's a while back, but I think my last years of high school were a little bumpy. I was in and out of high school, and I was a sailor for a year, and then I did make it back and finished high school, after which my first journey took me to Brazil, and that was literally my first flight ever. I flew to São Paulo, and I went to a project there called Monte Azul, which was a project working with Waldorf education in areas that are very people lived in shacks, as they were called, I think. Anyway, in very primitive housing, and it was headed up by Ytterjärna. I think that was a very formative moment for me, getting a much wider perspective on other ways of being in the world or having to be in the world. That had a lot of impact on me that carried through, I would say, through my educational period that followed. I would say I'm pretty autodidactical in terms of how I approach and work. But I went through a training into therapy through theater. That was something I wanted to work with, but then I realized that I would want to do that with children, and if children already need therapy, then there was something else maybe wrong. So I went full circle and went back to education, and did the teacher training, which I almost finished, and then not, because I decided that I was going to set up a bunch of older schools in the original style of working together with large corporate entities that would finance the education. But I got stuck in other places and ended up in the youth section in Switzerland, which then was the precursor for the YIP program, if you like. But at the age of 18, 19, 20 to 21, I moved around a lot. I think in Germany I have these Wanderjahre, they're called, where you go from to many places. So I've been moving across most of Europe, working on farms or in institutions or in different places, collecting information and experiences, I would say, at that age.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between other stories we've heard about this. Yeah, travel has been so important for many people. Different exposure to different cultures, which is such a big part of YIP, as I understand. Yeah. Noam, you're in the middle of this journey. You've shared a little bit about you kind of set out earlier than maybe most people. But what maybe you could continue the story from when you left school in 10th grade up until where you are now.
Yeah, totally. I stopped school in 10th grade because I really wanted to see more of the world. I really had an urge to doing things instead of sitting around. And I was lucky because I had great support of my parents. And then I went to Norway and worked on a biodynamic farm with many young people. And then I tried to find what next I could learn, and I decided I'll just take high school slower and more proper and do a full year of learning English properly. And so I applied to Campo Village in the US. And there again, I did a lot of farming and living in community, which was really nice. Yeah, and then I came back and I started a job in Germany, again on a farm. And I realized at some point that really I was looking for, that learning by doing is really great. But I started to see the privilege of going to school because it's so nice to I was looking forward to sit in a math class again and have something, present something already prepared for me and not needing to research everything on my own. So I was looking for something like YIP actually, and then I found something like YIP and I applied, and so far it's been great for me. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Do math.
Yeah, no math.
Someday. Fantastic. Yeah, so Reinoud, you talked a little bit about the origins of YIP. I understand that the origin story involves the youth section at the Ytterjärna, kind of the World Center of the Anthroposophical Movement in Switzerland. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's the origins of this initiative back 15, or how many years ago was it?
I would say, 17 maybe. It brewed for a couple of years in an international network of kind of youth activities within the larger aura of the anthroposophical movement, if you like. In my role as a member of the team at the youth section at the Ytterjärna, like you said, we organized a yearly gathering that we called the Initiative Meeting at the time, which brought together young people from around the world that were active within the anthroposophical movement, or again, the larger kind of aura of it that was fairly informal. They weren't necessarily members or anything like that. They had an interest and they were engaged in either conferences or other ways. And it's kind of surfaced in that group of people, this idea of, we ran into difficulties. A lot of young people felt that they are kind of restricted by the learning processes because you can't act in the real world yet, because you're kind of on dry land figuring it out and you're not allowed into the real arena yet, on the one hand. And on the other hand, and if you just get a job, then your education seems to cease if you're not careful. And so how can you combine a level of learning with a level of doing, and how can you already do while still also learning, sort of? And a bit of an urge that, the Gandhi quote came up a lot, of like, how can you be the change you see needed in the world? Which is also like a level of embodiment of what you're learning and talking about. and not just, being again on dry land or in a practice studio for 10 years before you're allowed into actually making the difference. And that had different forms. There was someone from the US that talked about a Jubilee year, which would have been more for like a year after Waldorf school. There were other ideas floating around. And then it became very concrete at some point when I was able to call a meeting about that. So one of these meetings, each afternoon we spent on actually designing such a program, which also meant that the idea, which didn't have a name yet at that point, at some point it was called the Youth Imagineering Program, which was dubbed too dorky, so we changed it again, but I still think it's a brilliant name anyway. It was already then with, I think, 29 different nationalities in the room that were part of that designing. But immediately a very international character and outreach, which was, I think, very helpful, and I see as being very important element of YIP, is that it's, we don't want to try and talk for the South Africans or for the Australians or something like that if we're not ourselves from those places, but rather we hope to have people from all walks of life and all continents present in each year's group so that they can speak for themselves and that you get the mingling of the world in each group as well and the perspectives. That's a little bit the relation to the youth section there. There's more philosophical aspects, if you like, but maybe they come later.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the name that you've settled on, Youth Initiative Program. This is for our local audience here in Viroqua, Wisconsin. This will be a little bit confusing because our local Waldorf-inspired high school, which I was involved with starting as a student and I've been a teacher at, is called the Youth Initiative High School. And we even had a couple of our Youth Initiative High School students attend the YIP program. So local audiences will need to know that this is a synchronicity. This is a shared. It's just there's not a formal relationship, but there is a kindred spirit, I think, here. So I wanted to ask what that term youth initiative, and the word initiative comes up a lot in your materials. What's that about? What's that pointing towards?
Yeah, I think for me, initiative is ideally an act of free will of an individual, but in service of the collective. And so it's a really tricky one because it's a little bit like if you go to a party and you're not feeling it and someone comes up to you and says, come on, do something spontaneous. And then you're stuck because if you now do something, is it because someone told you something or are you actually being spontaneous? And so in someone pushing you, you lost it. And that's a little bit the feeling I have with the initiative as well. Another image that I have that I adopt from Elizabeth Wirsching, a dear colleague. If you see a small child that is growing up and is just about to learn how to walk, so they stand at the chair or the leg and it's all wobbly and so forth, and then it's gonna fall. But then this kind of, I call it active waiting. So how can you be hyper attentive, maybe attend to the terrain, but you can't help because if you do, you steal the moment. So there's somewhere a tricky bit of an initiative that it can't be demanded or required. But I do think there are circumstances, rhythms, diversity, all kinds of things to do with terrain and everything around the learner that can be conducive to someone finding a question that they carry strong enough to actually start to act upon. And so for me, initiative is that something that someone brings into this world that they first need to have enough space for to maybe discover, and then hopefully have a conducive enough, if that's the word even, but a supportive environment or terrain that might start to manifest, or that they dare to believe it enough. It's a bit the role of Morpheus towards Neo,
Yeah.
You have to believe in it strong enough that they can start to believe in it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. In going through your website again in preparation for this, I came across the neologism that I'm trying out and may enter my vocabulary regularly, which is the concept of free responsibility, freedom and responsibility as being poles and but also bringing them together in a way as part of what you're trying to do. What is that? Yeah. You talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think those two are married to an extent, ideally. Like freedom without the responsibility, so just do what the hell you like, can be actually very destructive and can be very solitary. And I don't think in an interconnected world in which everything influences everything, that gets us very far. So I think real freedom is if you can act in this kind of level of where this initiative comes from, but that act be still in relation to the collective and therefore stay responsible. I think responsibility in that connection you could also replace with relation. Sure. I always really like how Orland Bishop puts it. He's been a contributor at Yale for many years. So his maxim or his mantra is often, how do I have to be for you to be free? And that is a relational question, and that is both to do with me, who am I, and who am I really, but also how are you, and what do you need to be really, and can there be a relation? And I think often that question is easily solved within humans, but I think the you could also replace with other living beings. So how would I have to be for another being to be the maximum of their sovereign expression, whilst at the same time be in service of the collective? And then I think you're looking at regenerative agriculture or something like that, where the farmer all of a sudden becomes a conductor of an orchestra of other organisms that can express themselves species specific, but in context. So I think, for me, it's a lot to do with freedom and relation, or freedom and responsibility. Those two are sort of similar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a lot to work with there. Yeah. Turning to you, Noam, I'm wondering, so you've been there, you've been at Yip since August, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about who are the other members of your cohort, where are they from, and are there some themes of what bring people to participate in this program?
Interesting question. Well, where are we from? I think 16 nationalities at this point. Yeah. From New Zealand, South Korea, Argentina, Spain, Germany, Belgium, all over. and I think for many people, well, we have a few people, I think, who came after high school to have a new point of view, I guess. And then, I'm struggling with this question. I don't really know. I think for me, I can say that, I think the self-responsible learning for me has been a big thing. And I think to learn how to learn self-responsible is very important growing up, and I noticed that a lot. And I think here in Yip there's so much support somehow, where you feel like it's not like school where they teach you something, but it's more you get supported in your self-responsible learning. Yeah.
So the context there is that Reinoud is describing seems really important. It's a place where those discoveries can be made. Can you talk about the actual physical location here? So this Yip doesn't happen in just one place, but it's got a strong home base there in Ytterjärna in Sweden. Can you describe that place and also where else do students go in the course of the program?
Yeah, so we live here in a house close to the fjord, really beautiful, and we have another building where we have the courses and lectures, and then sometimes we have courses where we visit other places like a farm or a workshop. And then we have also coming soon in March internships where all of us actually are going to different learning placements around the world to experience how life works at a different part of the world at the same time, basically, and where people also took initiative towards change, positive change, I guess. And and some people are going to Tanzania, to India, and some are going to South Africa and to Nepal even. I'm going to Vilnius, to a movement school. Yeah, very, very diverse.
Yeah, all over the world. And then people come back for the last portion there in Sweden.
Right, yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you talk about the months leading up to those to the internships? What sorts of things have you been doing this year? I know you have a lot of guest speakers, guest instructors, but what is the day-to-day life like, and what are some of the topics you've been exploring this year?
Yes, so we started off with a global realities block, and we had really nice lectures about all different things where we mostly looked outside, like into the world, and we had courses about economy and ecology and governance and activism, and what else do we have? Yeah, how to be human in a technological age. And then after that, we had a blog about inner awareness where we looked at each other's biographies, and we did also a lot of creative things like clay work and portrait painting and storytelling, which was really nice also because it's somehow with the weather here in Sweden, it becomes quite dark in fall and winter. So to look inside really makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if both of you or either of you could talk about how you support. You've got this very international people, a lot of different cultures and backgrounds coming together to really live together. They cook together. They're having to share their lives in a very active way. How does the program support people in doing that? Communication skills, conflict resolution, just setting up routines. How does that work?
Yeah, I think we have quite a lot of care structures from the program side. So as organizers, a normal day runs from 7 to 7. So we have long days. It's a lifestyle. It's not necessarily a 9 to 5 job in that sense. And our day starts with what we call service hour. So that's everybody engaged with some kind of community service, be it cleaning or cooking or setting up breakfast or any of that. Then breakfast is from 8 or 8 to quarter to 9-ish. And then at quarter to 9 we sing all together, and we have so-called round of announcements. So we look around the circle and see what else to be known, what needs to be known today. And that's also for the group already a first moment where some things can be caught if they are happening. But for the team, we meet at 7:30 every morning, and we go over the day and we see what's going on. Are there any things that need extra attention or attending to? And so we have a finger on the pulse quite closely, I would say, on a daily basis, which helps catch anything that needs catching. And then in the flow of the week, we have what we call check-in groups. So the whole group of students is divided over this time for co-workers. So that's 4 smaller groups. And that's much more about how are you doing, what's going on in your life, what was this week like, what have you learned, what have you not. So this is a little family kind of circle, if you like, stays the same group throughout the year. Also somewhat a confidential space. It's hosted The hosting is shared, so it goes around, but there's usually a talking piece, and it's a little structured in that way, and it has a care function. And then on the Friday we have something that we call the community meeting, which is with everybody. So that's students and staff together, and that's similar than the check-in, but on a larger scale. And it's different in that not everybody is so confident in speaking in front of large groups, especially if it's concerning, personal issues or things that they're struggling with. But that is another circle that has a practical aspect of kind of looking at who's coming next week, what do we need to prepare, who's on breakfast next week, those kind of logistical things. But also invitations and reminders of concerts that are going on, or buskings that are being planned, or parties, whatever. And then there's what we call an open space, which tends to be between a half an hour to an hour, that is really set aside for anything that is alive in the community to be able to be shared or be present with. So that's, again, it's a bit of a hosted space, where, I often say, I invite that the space is a little different than you and me walking to the bus stop. That can also be a good conversation, but it can be a bit kind of easygoing, and it's a bit more intentional space that it's not religious in that sense or anything like that, but it is intentionally set aside from other chit chat that we might have. So that's another one, and then last aspect, and then you will have to chime in if I'm telling nonsense. But one of our team members is a biographical counselor, also trained as a psychologist, which can also really help people that are struggling for some conversations. And I think that's a little bit where the limits are as well. We're not a therapeutic program, and we don't claim to be, but we do invite the whole human being, and we tend to have light and darker sides in ourselves. And so we will assist definitely people to find support if they need it. But those are some of the support structures that are definitely helping. Yeah, and I think it comes through maybe, but we live and learn together. So it's we share all meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So there's a lot of relation building going on without that necessarily needing extra time and attention, if that makes sense.
You live there on campus with your family, Reinoud?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, all in. Noam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it can be intense. It is quite full. Yeah, I think if you come to Yip, you really need to be ready for many people all the time. But that's also really fun. That's the fun of it, basically. But it can also be really exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah, here at our program, Thoreau College, that has actually been one of the tightrope lines to walk. And we definitely have, a number of our students are self-identified introverts or people who are, inspired by the idea of Henry David Thoreau seeking solitude. So are there ways for people to have experiences of solitude there if they have enough of the people for a little while?
Yeah, within the facilities, quite limited, I would say. Because often people share rooms, so that's another layer of it. But we are situated in a very rural community, very beautiful, with a very pristine forest around, especially within the Sweden context. So everybody thinks, wow, Sweden is full of forests. No, it's not. It's full of tree plantations. They're all the same trees and the same age, and they're nicely lined up so that you can cut them in 35 years from now. And the forest around here is still quite wild, and so I think for those people that seek that is a possibility, but it is limited, I think, right?
Yes.
It tends to be, now that it's dark and cold, and you need to stay inside, it gets tight.
Yeah.
But I think also that's like where you learn, or that's where, or for me at least, like really being mindful of the time and when you do what, and also checking in with yourself, like when you really need to step out. Because usually in life, somehow I experienced it, that you really need to make an effort, well, in comparison to Yale, and to see people and to meet somebody, because usually you live in a house somewhere, and here it's just you need to make an effort to not see people, which is just very different. Different experience.
Yeah. So before we get too much farther here, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about the Social Initiative Forum. This is an integral part of the year of the 10-month-long program, and it's coming up pretty soon. Could you introduce us to this event and talk a bit about it, and how does it fit in, and what is it like?
Yes. Yeah. We've been working on this since, September, basically. And I think it touches a lot, actually, when I was listening to Reinoud before, upon this relating and connection theme. So we sat together in the beginning of the year, all of us participants, and we tried to decide on a topic, and coming from 40 opinions to one. And I think a common theme for all of us was the struggle of disconnect in the world, where we noticed that basically in everything there is a struggle of disconnection and maybe even loneliness or getting out of hand in some direction. And we could see it in very much in the social realm, in the natural world, and also within ourselves. For example, like industrial farming and the loss of biodiversity, or an increase of mental illnesses, and also in education you can see that too, I think. So we want to address that. So we tried to come up with a name. It's called the Spark to Flame Forum, because we think that if many sparks come together, there can be a big flame, that as a symbol for connection. And I think our subtitle is Reigniting the Connection to Each Other, Self and Nature. Yeah, and so we don't necessarily have the answer, because it's tricky to have the answer, but we want to figure out or hold this question together with the participants who come, hopefully many. And so we have, it goes over 5 days, I think, and we have like 3 main lectures to each topic. First, we're gonna hear about a course about the social realm, which is, the title is Why Can't We Be Human by Ourselves? Jannis Kröli is going to come from Germany, and he's going to talk about the human experience and the connection between the self and the other, and how that plays into all of that. I'm really excited for that course, actually. and then we'll have the Self Day, where Annie Meijer will hold a course on biography work and how to connect to yourself within today's world. And on the 3rd day, we will look at nature with Lien de Koster. Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she noticed that many people have a longing to belong, and often people turn to the natural world to look there. And she wants to hold a course on that. And then we'll have many workshops and campfires and walks and night cafes and open mics. Parties.
So this is essentially a youth conference, and who besides the current yippies, who will be there? What sort of people come?
We hope anyone who wants to come. The tickets are open to anyone. Yes.
Is there any way that a person could participate remotely this year?
has not been the planning thus far. I think the consensus was to try and go for in-person connection rather than digital ones. But it's interesting because your question has come up from others as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a topic. But for now, it's an in-person event that is taking place. It will be on the same campus here in Ytterjärna. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and this is something that's been going on for a number of years, correct, Reinoud?
Yeah, it serves a number of purposes. I think, it has had a little bit of an effect of a return event. So it's been sometimes for alumni to come back, and we've did a forum also because it's often a platform for people to present some of their starting projects or the things that they are starting to work with after year. And so it has a little bit of an element of keeping the network connected. That obviously has had a disruption as all of us had been locked into rooms and houses. And so, we'll see how that restarts. And it has often attracted young people in general that are looking for initiatives and are wanting to engage somewhere in the world, as well as initiatives that are looking for young people, that way around as well sometimes, that would come and have presentation and possibility to find people. And then I think the event itself is, it's in my own experience working at the time for the youth section and those days, if you organize a conference from A to Z, so that's including everything, then you sort of go through all the stages that it would take to start a business or to set up a school or to start a library, or, you sort of go through all the stages. And especially if you do that together with a large group, the amount of group dynamics that play into that as well is quite significant. So it's been a really wonderful tool, I think, to put all the learning into practice. I'm not a great fan of staying with hypothetical learned topics. That's nice, but that's not really embodied yet, where I think it's a really nice chance to actually take something from an idea state all the way into its manifestation, which is just very helpful to have done once, and I think quite empowering to see, wow, actually, this thing that didn't exist at all, and I was just, I call it a brain fart, excuse my French, at the beginning of the program, it now actually happened, and that's great. And I think that's an empowering experience. So that's also this last block. You mentioned the first block is kind of looking at the burning fires in the world. The second block is more like, what are the building sites in myself? And the third block really sits around, okay, if we want to act in this world, it's very likely you're going to have to do that together with others. So how do you live and work and achieve regardless of your differences and all those things? So this, we call it community and collaboration. That's this block that we're in now. And that culminates in the initiative forum. So the initiative forum is sort of the end result, if you like, or I would like to say more the celebration of those efforts made in the months leading up.
This is a great manifestation of this idea of initiative, right? From also in your website, you talk about idea to manifestation, and it's certainly something I believe in as well. We try to do here in many different ways at Thorough College. I think we talked a bit earlier on about anthroposophy, and I certainly look to Yip personally as a model, as a pioneer in this field of thinking about what does these insights coming out of anthroposophy bring to organizing education for young adults. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about this. I mean, students, the age range you give is 18 to 28, so a pretty big age range there, and we certainly see interest here from students across that age range. What uniquely do people in that phase of life? What can we bring that best serve people in that age?
I see a bit of a fractal situation there where if up until 21 years of age roughly is my understanding, and that is fed by the school of thought as given by Steiner and anthroposophy, I would say you're still building your instrument, and egotism is necessary and healthy. And you need to be self-centered and self-focused. And I compare it often to if you learn how to ride a bike, then and that might have a motivation of why you start that, and that looks really nice or that looks really efficient or something like that. There's a period where you have to practice. And in that period, the whole point of what you're doing is the doing. So you can't focus on other areas. You just need to be doing what you're doing until that becomes a skill. And so what happens then, there's a transition from something that was an aim to becoming a means or a tool. And so there's a crossover point, which is subtle and you might not notice. And at some point we're just doing it and it becomes second or first nature and we're just running. But I think in personal development, something similar is ongoing. Like to do the me is very good and important to achieve it. But then there comes a point of asking, oh, okay, now not me, and okay, I sort of know what I'm capable of, some of my skills, I'm somewhat mature. And then comes the question of this, what is it going to be in service of? And I think if you look at our society, especially also in the professional world, I would say the last 500 years we have done a lot of specialization, which is a similar trend as this me. It's very narrow, and it means a specialization in a nutshell is knowing more about less. So that's nice, but it's pointless if it's not contextualized.
Right.
So when we break through to the other side and measure how is this highly specialized something actually serving the collective, and is it? Maybe it's not. And maybe actually it needs to redirect, or maybe what people are finding out in, the cell structures of the early stages of an embryo that seem to have to do with resilience, maybe that's the structure we should use for our financial system rather than to investigate it even further. Anyway, I think there needs to be some cross-pollination, or some places that larger context is really, really important. And then again, if you go back to young people, I think I felt stuffed back when I was younger, and I still feel, maybe I'll grow up one day, but anyway, there's really an issue of choice, because you can do a million things in many places, and that backfires, because the feeling that I think people get, so I could do a million things, but I need to choose one. So if I choose one, I'm saying just under a million times no, because I'm not going to do all those things now because I've chosen this one. It doesn't feel very great. It's quite a negative experience typically, unless I think it is possible to do that kind of zooming out. How can we create large enough perspectives in which it all of a sudden you can start to see patterns and say, oh wow, maybe this is an area that actually we as a collective need to further develop and move with, and it's actually fitting even with how I feel and am in this world. And that is not at the stage yet. That's because if you have decided that you want to bake bread, that's easy. You find a baker and they can tell you, and it doesn't make sense to put the water in first. You first put something else, and then there's an order in doing things, and that makes sense. And then you can learn it really quickly. But before you figured out that it is that you want to be a baker, I think that's the stage at which there's very little, and where I would say it helps to create spaces that are undefined by this stage. That are almost the opposite of a specialization, that are a generalization from which an orientation can take place. That's then up for these people. And I'll say my last thing, and then I tend to launch into long rants, so you have to stop me. But I think the future for me always, comes from young people, and that comes from the future towards us. We're not heading that way, but it's also coming this way, sort of. Yeah. And so if we want to be outside of the box, then you have to not even have one. Then so if you can just create a space in which things can be, and where also especially young people can be and sit with their questions, I think that is much, much more productive. And yeah, I think if you take our media, if you have a real question and someone gives a plausible answer, you might settle for it, and then you're back to sleep again. So and there's also something for a questioning culture that is allowed to be and to stay alive and open and unanswered, because then I think you're much more active in your search. I don't know if that made any sense, but I think these spaces in which it's possible for young people at an age of having to make this sort of transition from being, seeking to be in service of something, those are crucial and need large perspectives, is my view. I hope that made sense.
That made a tremendous amount of sense. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'll definitely want to go listen to that again. I'm glad we recorded it. Do you want to add anything to that, Noam, from what you've experienced there? It strikes me that you've done something that's familiar from a number of the students who've come here, who've they've sensed something was missing in their education, or they had an urge to get out into the world and do things, and they struck out on their own, and they did a lot of things, but they did also long for context, for a community, for a place for this sort of thinking that Reinoud is describing to happen. Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, very much so. I'm feeling really grateful to be in a place where I can really hold these questions, because sometimes I feel that those questions can stretch me a lot, and then I always feel like I need an answer now, and there is no answer really, and then to get a context and to also do other things and hear about other things where it can always come back to it if it needs to come back to the question, and somehow they answer themselves if you stop wanting to answer the question. And I noticed that a lot in Yip, also having the support to hold those questions and not being alone in that is so special for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. I guess my last question. I mean, Reinoud, as a person who is you've been active on a very specific location there, but also on a continental and a global level in education and movements of this kind. I'm wondering if you, from your experience of a number of years now, have a perspective on where does this work go into the future? Should there be more yips? Is there a way that they can collaborate? Is there a way that is there a new youth movement of some kind that's being formed out of this type of education that you see?
Well, I would hope that there can be a multitude of these sort of spaces. I'm not a fan of franchises or growth in that sort of sense. I think if I look into the natural world, then I think I see many small things, or there's a size to things. So I think there will be more of those places. One trend that I'm seeing, and it's gone to sleep a little bit, but I think it will come back again also, is also for ways of people for this next phase, once they actually want to go out and start their learning, because now they decided to be a baker, for instance. Mm-hmm. What I've seen a lot is that they then wish to cluster, so they live together in shared housing whilst pursuing their individual tracks of either academic education or practical learning or these kind of things. So I see a little bit of a trend there of clusters of learners in their own ways that seek this element of community and peer mirroring and co-accountability sort of situations without being on the same tram, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that will be something growing as well, that there'll be more of those situations, and there maybe we have a role as some of the people hosting these places to try and create circumstances in which these people can meet each other, because I think, so that maybe there needs to be some level of networking. Although I'm not a fan, again, of, so sometimes we get asked, so then the result of what we're asked for would basically mean that their logo will be on our website and our logo on theirs, but there's not actually anything that we do together. And so I think that's a little pointless. I think it's great if it manifests out of events. There's an interesting network that I can mention to you. It's called the Ecoversity.
Uh-huh.
That's growing. It's very different in scale, but quite similar in some intention at least. They're having yearly gatherings, sometimes twice a year, which is a little bit of that sort of an initial networking, and then you have to see what grows from it. But again, I think back to this initiative, I think if you're already expecting it in a particular form or something like that, then I'm not sure that it will fly. I think it really needs to come from the people, and
the people and the place and the moment in time. I bring this up because definitely this podcast is part of a project also to spread awareness of initiatives like YIP and similar projects, and also because also on our website we've tried to list as many inspiring programs as we can find, and it does feel very much like an emergent phenomenon in the world. I just spoke yesterday with a man in Japan who started an initiative that sounds very similar in many ways, with many of the similar kind of values and goals, and that's to me is very exciting. It is interesting for a young person to have that kind of landscape around the world to be able to explore.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, so I want to thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today. Before we go here, I wonder if you could state, first of all, if a person is able to get to Sweden and to Ytterjärna and would like to participate in the Social Initiative Forum, we'll have this interview out today. And if you could just say how would a person sign up to come to that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the dates are the February 26th. Is that when it starts?
Yes, on February 26th to March 2nd. And we have a website. It's initiativeforum.yip.se, I think. And yes, and there is all the information to be found. There's tickets available and the program is out. Very exciting.
It's a 5-day program of events.
Right. Yes. Cool. And we are also on any social media accounts, very active these days. Yes.
So Initiative Forum, one word, .yip.se.
Yeah. And also, could you say, if a person hears this is excited about becoming a Yippie for the next cycle, how do they apply, and what's the time frame for that?
Yeah, so you can go to also the website, which is yip.se, so yip.se. And there's a button there with YIP16. That is the next year. You are asked then to fill in a little form, which will trigger an email, which then gives you the real homework of signing up. We're not playing something divine that decides it for you, but we do want you to consider it well. So there's quite a few questions that are there and considerations that are more, again, not for us to claim any divinity over your destiny, but rather for you to really ponder whether this is a good idea and really what you want. So there's a process there, and then there will be the final stage is a little interview, usually on this kind of a platform, on Zoom or something like it. To see if we have what you're looking for and whether, we feel that we can work together well. And then I think the first acceptance deadline is the end of March, and then the last one is somewhere in June. I don't have have it off the top of my head now, but there are 2 points for intake where all those interviews will be had, and we have 40 places that we can offer. If people turn up in the drones, then maybe we have to, take over a station in Detroit or something like that. For now, that's our capacity here.
Franchise.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for all that information. Thank you for your leadership and your vision, and thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, and thank you for your work and connecting the dots in this field. It's really nice.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity as well. It's really nice.
Great.